Okay, now we're going to spend a couple of minutes and talk about the finesse stuff that I use for the upcoming couple of months. First, I'll talk about the shaky head a little bit. Shaky head's something I use right up until it gets real hot out, and it seems to be kind of a successful spring into summer pattern. A lot of guys use shaky head around here, and they use different techniques, different tackle for it, but I'll show you the two shaky heads that I use and some of the worms that I like to use too. So we'll start out with the first shaky head I like to use is a 1/4 ounce, and I'll show you who makes this. Z-Man, this is called the Z-Man shaky heads, and that's one that I primarily use more than anything else, and that's it right there. And if you look real close, you can see a little collar just in back of the ball, and I'm going to hook one of these up for you on one of my worms, and I'm going to cover the worms. But this is a 4-inch. This is the Yamasenko 4-inch. So basically, it's just a 4-inch Senko. But the way I hook this up is I run that hook just through the top of the bait and let it come out maybe a 1/4 inch or something like that, because there's just a little gap between that collar and that ball head. So what I want to do is just run that up there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it all the way up and get it just past that little collar. Then I'm going to take it, I'm going to push back a little bit, and I'm going to hook my hook right in there just like that. And I'll tell you guys something about the shaky head and having success with shaky head. I mean, these fish aren't very smart, but these fish, I've found that if you got a lot of kinks in your worm and it's all kinked up, it's not straight, I just don't think you get as many bites. I mean, the fish, you know, they're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I think they can figure out some of these baits and some of these worms. And the more realistic you make that worm look when it's dragging across the bottom or you're hopping it or something like that, I think the better success you're going to have. So I like to keep that worm just about as straight as I can and just make sure that that hook is just underneath it. I can just feel the edge of the hook. Kind of catches my finger right there. But anyway, that's a 4-inch Senko with the shaky heads ball head, 1/4 ounce, and that's probably my favorite right there. So that's one that I use, and it's one that I've been using for the last couple weeks too, because when I was using these 5-inch worms, like this longer 5-inch worm right here, I noticed right now a lot of these fish, they're not totally committed to the worm. You know, they're getting ready to spawn, and so sometimes they don't really want to eat it as much as they just want to get it out of the way. So right now, a lot of these fish, and you've probably noticed this too on these bigger worms, when they come up and eat this thing, they're going to bite it kind of in the tail, and they're going to pull on it, or they're going to bite it right behind the hook. And what they do is they get a hold of it, and then their lips kind of slide down, and they just bite it, and they pull on it, and they kind of move it and then let it go, or they'll pull it out of the way, you know, and you'll pull back and it'll pop out of their mouth. And I've probably lost more worms or half worms over the last couple weeks than any time during the year, and it's just short strikes is all it is. So when it's short strikes like that, I'll switch down and I'll go to a 4-inch vice a 5 or a 6-inch trick worm, something like that. Another head that I like to use, and I used it for the last 2 weeks, is this Trocar. This is kind of, I think they call it a shell buster, but this is a 1/4 ounce, and I'll kind of show you what one looks like here. I'm gonna put one together, but if you look real close, you'll see it's got like kind of a hook on the collar there, right in back of the head, and then it's got that funky shaped hook. Not real crazy about it. I mean, I've used it for the last couple weeks, and man, seems like I went to set the hook on a lot of fish, and it doesn't have the hook set quality that shaky heads has. But I wanted to try this one because number one, it's something different. Number two, I like that little keeper on there. So what I'm doing with these is I'm just gonna kind of take the good worm here. I'm going to take this worm and I'm just going to, once again, I'm just going to put it kind of a 1/4 inch down. And then I'm going to slide it up the head, slide it up all that keeper there and get it behind that last hook on the keeper. And I'm just going to kind of take it and I'm going to push back on the worm a little bit and I'm going to pull it back through. And that's kind of what it looks like. It's another straight worm, and that's a 1/4 ounce trocar. Quarter ounce trocar head right there. So that's another one that I'm using. So the worms that I use, you've heard me talk about, and you've seen videos. Power bait, the General, Berkeley Power. It's got max scent on it, and this is a 5-inch green pumpkin color. It's probably my favorite right there, and it's the Berkeley General. This thing's got some good stink to it, and these fish kind of like that stink. So I'll use that 5-inch a lot of times. Right now, the 5-inch worms are maybe just a little bit big for a lot of these fish, but they'll eat this. The second one is just a regular, this is a 4-inch Senko, Yamamoto Senko, and I use that especially when these fish are short striking. And another one that I like to use is Z-Man. They use Elastec Vice Plastisol, and I made a lot of worms over the years. I used to make them, you know, and all I used was Plastisol. But you know, with these Z-Man worms, they're softer with that Elastec. They've got a lot of stretch to them, you know, and they're pretty forgiving. I mean, look at that. I mean, you can really stretch that out, and they're softer, and they're there's something when the fish bites into it, you know, he feels how soft that is, not like Plastisol, and he seems to want to just bring that, suck that on in and just carry it off. So it's a different bite with these little Z-Man soft worms, but it's another one that I like to use. I like to use these Yamamoto 5-inch. This is the Nico Fat, and sometimes on these Nico worms, you can use these like wacky style, and then what you do is you put a nail weight in that flat side, like the flat side of the worm. What I'll do is when I'm wacky rigging, I'll wacky rig something like this, but what I'll do is I'll put a little nail weight on that flat end of that worm right there, and I'll use that wacky style, but with that little nail weight in it, it's going to kind of sink, and it's just a different look for the fish. You know, it's something that they don't see a whole bunch. You know, they'll see Senkos that are wacky rigged that you know, they just kind of sink down to the bottom kind of slow. But anyway, you nail weight it and it'll sink down one end instead of just sinking down weightless. So another one is different colored Yamamoto Senkos. You know, these fish, whenever they're post-spawn or they're getting ready to pre-spawn or even spawn, you know, these crazy colors and crazy flash and things like that, it seems to kind of trigger strikes. So that's on the Shaky head, and like I say, there's all kinds of different worms that you can use. I like the 4-inch, 5-inch. I like the green pumpkin. That's green pumpkin. These fish really like to react to that green pumpkin. So that's a couple different Shaky heads and a couple different worms that I like to use, and I'll be using these over the next few months. You know, points, docks, just wherever, just a lot of different places where I think the fish are going to be post-spawn or staged up to spawn, and they're going to keep spawning all the way through the next month or two. You know, there's going to be some late spawners, there's early spawners, so a lot going on right now, a lot of different baits to work. But as far as the Shaky head, that's the Shaky head I use. The second thing I'm going to do is with the Finesse is I'm going to drop shot. That's going to start up any time now. I probably should have been already drop shotting, but I got my drop shot rigged up for when I get back on the water, and I'll start using that on these brush piles because some of these post-spawn fish are going to be moving out to that brush. You know, they're going to take a chill break, and they're going to kind of hang out deep in the brush for a little bit and just kind of lay on the bottom and gather up some strength. And once they get their strength back, they're going to start eating, and they'll eat that drop shot. Last year right around this time or just a little bit later, I started targeting some brush fish that were post-spawn with the drop shot. Mainly on the drop shot, I'll show you the way I like to rig this up. rods out of the way here. So on my drop shot, there's several different ways to use it, several different guys that use different things for drop shot. But what I did was, this is my little drop shot holder here, and I pre-rig my drop shots because when I get out on the lake and I get the drop shot, and a lot of times, especially if you're fishing this brush in late spring, a lot of times you got to get right down in the brush. I mean right into the thick of the brush to get these fish out of there because they're thick in that brush. So, you know, you might break one off, and instead of tying a whole new drop shot, I'll kind of simplify it. So what I did was I just took a little piece of these little floats here, and what I do is I take a little drop shot weight. I like the ball type, so that's the weight right there, and that's the hook end of it. The hook that I like to use, let's see if I got one here. I don't know if I've got one, but this hook is a VMC hook. It's called a spin shot, and it's got like a little swivel on it right there at the top. So that cuts down on a lot of your line twists. So I like to use that. If you can see that right there, see the little swivel. So I got it tied up there, and then once again, I'm probably about, this is kind of a longer line here, so I made this one probably about 16 inches or something like that, so it's long. So I want to keep that worm kind of up a little bit off the bottom, and so I've got the longer drop shot. But as we get into summer, I'll shorten up that leader line a little bit. But I keep all my drop shot rigs on this little foam tube here, and I just put like 4 or 5 of them on here, 6 of them, that I'll go through in a day. I'll probably go through a few. So I got them all set up here and ready to go. So that's my little drop shot holder, and that's something that I use throughout the summer for my drop shots. But the main worm that I like to use on my drop shot, and I think everybody ought to have a few bags of them in their boat, and that's Lanier Baits Blue Lily. That's just about all I use now is Blue Lily, and I'm not the only one. I mean, there's a lot of guys that use Blue Lily, but Blue Lily is something that I'll go through several bags a year. I'm going to try this little emerald one by KBD Baits. I like the emerald color, I always have, and so that's one that I'll use with the drop shot, and that's coming up before too long. We'll all start drop shotting. So that's my little drop shot rig, and the line that I use on that is 6-pound test, and I make different size leaders, all the way up from about 20 inch down to probably about 8 to 12 inches on the leader, and it just depends on the time of year and the way I'm using the drop shot. But that's the second finesse tactic that I use this time of year, is we're just getting ready to do the drop shot. And so that's a couple finesse things that I do. And the last thing I wanted to talk about just a little bit was Topwater. It's not going to be too long, and these fish, when they start eating, they're in the threadfin shad get ready to spawn. We're gonna start seeing more topwater, especially when the bluebacks get ready to spawn. You know, a lot of these bluebacks come to the surface, threadfin come to the surface to get that warm sunlight early in the morning and get nice and warmed up. Bass are waiting on them, so they're going to push them on up to the surface, and they're going to feed on the surface. Now, there's 3 topwater baits that I'm going to use over the next, I don't know, month, 2 months, something like that. First off is the emerald popper. I always got that tied on this time of year, and I tied that on last week, and it'll be tied on, I don't know, probably till October, maybe even further than that. But I'll have one of these tied on in the boat for the next few months, for sure. And you know, this is something, if you look through my videos and posts, well, you're going to see the emerald popper, and that's something that you need to have. One of those poppers right there, whether it's mine or a different one, poppers work good on Lanier. Another one probably in late spring that's probably my favorite bait, and this is this little walking bait here. This is called the Z-Dog, and it's made by Profound Outdoors. There's one right there still in the box. I go through a few of these every year, but this is probably my favorite walking bait, maybe my second favorite, but this is one that's old reliable. I've been using not only on Lanier, but on other lakes for not only spotted bass, but largemouth too. probably the most effective walking bait. It's translucent, you know, it really fools these bass. Probably better than any other translucent walking bait that I've used. But that's the Profound Outdoors Z-Dog. And as far as the color pattern goes, this is Casper Shad. Casper Shad is one of my top producers. Don't think I've caught more bass on anything else, but if there was one that ran a close second or maybe even a first, it's this little 4-inch, it's like a Spook Junior knockoff. It's white pearl, and that's one that I use a lot all throughout the spring and summer. When it's low light or overcast, white is the way to go, and this bait right here, it puts them in the boat for me every year. So I paint up a few of these, or you can even use the Spook Junior. I don't think the Spook Junior comes in a pearl white like this, but you need something either bone or white for overcast early morning, situations like that where you've got low lights. So this is the white walking bait, and that's the third topwater bait that I'm going to have either tied on or I'm going to have it nearby. And like early in the morning, even sometimes throughout the day, like if you go back to some of my YouTube videos over the past few years, you're going to see that this produced some monsters during the summertime. Even in the heat of the summer, the fish were really on the little white walking baits. So that's the the main three topwater baits I use. That's not all I'll use. I'll use, you know, Whopper Plopper is a good bait. I don't have any out here, but there's a time when the Whopper Plopper is going to work pretty good, and I'm probably going to start using that too. So there's all different kinds of Whopper Ploppers. The 110 is probably my favorite size, but you know, Whopper Ploppers are something that always work pretty good in late spring and into early summer, so I'll use that a good bit too. So that's some of the walking baits that I use. So that's the topwater stuff, and I think I've covered just about everything. So you know, we're still a little bit out for the topwater, but I would say that you need to start thinking about it and getting it tied on and getting it ready, because it's not going to be long. So there you go, topwater baits. We covered some finesse stuff, so hopefully that'll help you out over the next couple months.